What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to talk to you about today. We're going to be mainly talking about conditions that I've been noticing in the Atlantic. We've been noticing the water temperatures have really surged across much of the Atlantic and especially in the tropics, so we're going to be talking about that today, but we're also going to be talking about what's going on in the Eastern Pacific, mainly to improve forecasting and to kind of see how this is going to affect what's going to be happening in the Atlantic. So let's go ahead and dive right into it right here. Here's what we have for the National Hurricane Center. We have post-tropical cyclone Cosme. The NHC put out their last advisory on that this morning. And how do I know it's the last advisory? Well, it tells me this is the last advisory because Cosme is now a remnant low. Its maximum sustained winds are 35 miles per hour, pressure of 1,007 millibars, and it's moving east-northeast at 7 miles per hour. That's pretty much all you got going on for Cosme right there. This is the last time we're going to be talking about it. This is the last time the NHC is going to be talking about it. Time to move on. But now let's go ahead now and shift over to what we're seeing right here. We're seeing two areas of interest that have been popping up over here. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these, starting with Invest 93E. And this is what the description has. An area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms located several hundred miles south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec is associated with a broad area of low pressure. Environmental conditions appear conducive for development of this system, and a tropical depression is expected to form late this week or this weekend, while it moves generally west-northwestward just offshore the southwestern coast of Mexico. Formation chance in the next 48 hours is medium at 50%, so it's really jumped up from 10 to 50, and now the chance of formation in the next 7 days is now at 90%, which has continued to uptick a little bit more and more. That's probably where it's going to max out before we start seeing this thing develop, so we're going to want to pay attention to that as well, and we're going to look at some more satellite imagery in just a second to kind of give you a glance as to what's going on. And the next thing we have going on over here is what we have with this area of interest that has been tagged by the NHC. 0-20% probability. This is more of a long-term threat that we're going to want to pay attention to as well. An area of low pressure is forecast to develop late this weekend or early next week near the coast of Central America. Environmental conditions appear conducive for some gradual development of the system as it moves west-northwestward near the coasts of Central America and southern Mexico. 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days. So that's kind of what we have going on in the Eastern Pacific right now from the NHC. We're going to go ahead now and shift back to satellite imagery. And we're going to go ahead and move to the Eastern Pacific as well, just to kind of take a quick glance of what's going on. So here's what we have going on. Cosme's pretty much not on the radar anymore. It's this area of interest we're paying attention to. And there are a few features to take a look at with this. Number one, the convection is starting to organize, wrap around more and more across much of the low pressure area that's been designated by the NHC. You're starting to notice increased organization with that, and we can zoom in a little bit further with Invest 93E. It's starting to pop up more and more as it gets closer to the center. A lot of the convection is generally more so like away from the center, but it's starting to get more, at least some popcorn convection is getting closer to the center of circulation, so we're going to want to pay attention to that right there. And then moving back to the Eastern Pacific satellite imagery to kind of give a view of what's going on as a whole, we're going to go ahead now and show you the water vapor imagery just to kind of show you the environment we're in. Pretty moist environment, mainly due to what we were seeing with the last two systems that were in the EPAC. This is likely going to be the fourth system that's been going on over there, so we're going to want to pay very close attention to that as well. And then we have this area of interest that's been tagged. This is not, I believe, a part of it, at least in terms of the convection. This convection over here is not a part of that area of interest that has the 020 tag, but rather it's part of the larger tropical wave that's starting to develop over here off the southern coast of Mexico. If it does develop, it's likely not going to do too much in terms of impacting people, but we can go ahead and show you some runs to kind of indicate what may be going on with that, and we can shift over to the EPAC just to kind of give you an idea of this. So let's go ahead and go to the 0Z for the Euro. right here. So here's what we have going on. Basically, you have the system developing. It's going to develop in the next few days, and then it gets down to tropical storm strength, but then it starts to move into a drier environment as well as cooler waters. It starts to weaken and then tear itself apart. That's pretty much what's going on with it according to the European. Not really that much is going to be happening with it, but I still watch this mainly for forecasting reasons. Right here, going to the 0Z GFS because we use the 0Z Euro. Organization development. The GFS wants the system to get down to a mid-range category 1 hurricane, but that's the GFS in a nutshell. It's usually pretty aggressive with that as well. Looking like a tropical storm, in my opinion, right here, unless we see some unexpected rapid development. Looking at the Canadian run as well, taking a quick gander at that right now. Basically, the Canadian run actually wants this further to the coast and a little bit closer to Mexico, where it could impact a lot of those regions as well, with some heavy rainfall and all of that, but it eventually weakens and dissipates as the new area of interest starts to organize and develop off Central America, and then it strengthens up to a potential hurricane before making landfall in Mexico. So we're going to want to pay attention to that as well, and we'll continue to keep you updated. Looking at the icon run, that's the last one we have. Organization and development, although it doesn't get stronger than like 50 to 60 mile per hour tropical storm strength. Wind shear, dry air, and cooler waters tear it apart, and that's pretty much the last that we have of that right there. So ultimately, still a pretty in a pretty active Eastern Pacific region right there to pay attention to. And the reason we're paying attention to why it's so active in the Eastern Pacific is because of how it's going to be affecting the Atlantic region. In fact, well, a lot of major activity in the Eastern Pacific like this generally tends to suppress tropical activity, at least tropical development in the Atlantic, because you have shear from the outflow moving into the Gulf and the Caribbean and all that stuff, generally making it more unfavorable for that region over there. So it looks like, at least for much of June, the region is going to be shut down, at least in terms of the Gulf and the Caribbean, for tropical development. Although there has been some things that have been piquing my interest a little bit, and we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to go to the Climate Prediction Center, since they did update yesterday. And this is what they have for tropical cyclone activity right now for the Atlantic region. So pretty much what we were looking at for potential development, we do have a small area that's less than 20% across parts of the Bay of Campeche. I've been talking to Tony about it. He thinks that something might be firing off over there, but the main stuff is going to be in the Eastern Pacific, at least for the time being. And even going into late June, it looks like the Atlantic's going to be quiet, so we're going to want to pay attention to that as well. But by and large, this is kind of what we were looking at and kind of what we were expecting. We were expecting a quiet June. We were expecting things to maybe start ramping up in the last few days of such, but then starting in July is when things going to start ramping up more. And now we're going to go ahead and show you some of the conditions as to why we think that may be the case. And we'll go ahead and start with the main condition, that being the global sea surface temperatures. So here's what we have with the SSTs. The SSTs across much of the Atlantic have been surging, and I'm not making this up. In fact, we can even show you what we were looking at 4 days ago across much of these regions right here. So here's what we have going on. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit to show you this. So about 4 days ago now, we were looking at SST temperatures across the Gulf region, like cracking 29 across the Loop Current, the Bay of Campeche, and a few other areas, but mainly 28, 27 across much of the regions right there. So we're going to want to pay attention to that. But it's mainly the warm water has been concentrated in the northwestern Caribbean region and a few isolated spots away from that. What are we looking at right now? Boom. More warm water everywhere. Look at this now. You're looking at 29 plus degrees Celsius waters across much of the Gulf region right now compared to what we were seeing previously. Those sea surface temperatures really are starting to warm up right now, especially as we're starting to notice a little bit of a feature over here, and we're going to go ahead and show you that with the European. Let's go ahead and go to 500 millibar height anomalies right here. So this is what we have going on. We'll go ahead and show you the 0Z for a long-term forecast. You're starting to notice a ridge pattern across much of the eastern United States is building up right here, and that's going to impact much of the Gulf region and the northwestern Caribbean. Why is it going to do that? Well, ridges bring warmer temperatures generally, and they also bring less activity. So what that ultimately is going to do is that those height anomalies, higher heights equal warmer temperatures, And we're also going to, and we're looking at these higher heights and these warmer temperatures, and that's going to help a lot of the Gulf and a lot of the Caribbean really start to warm up quite a bit. It's already starting to do that, as a matter of fact, but as this ridge starts to build itself more and more across much of the eastern US, it's going to allow for a high pressure dome to potentially develop over there, a heat dome, as you may say. It's been starting to warm up quite a bit across much of the Midwest as well, as I've noticed. And that's going to really ramp up the water temperatures in the Caribbean and the Gulf region. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. That surge is going to continue, and you're seeing another even stronger ridge moving through the eastern U.S., continuing to expand that high pressure heat dome that we've been watching, and that's what's generally going to be going on for much of the forecast period. It doesn't really start to lift even throughout the forecast period. So we're going to probably see the rest of this month really see another surge of SSTs similar to what we saw back in May. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you the graph that we have pulled up right now. For May, we went from 26.2 to roughly about 28.7. So that's about a 2.5 degree surge in the span of about a month, which that's for the United States, that's about 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Not just in one isolated area, but across an entire body of water. And it looks like now we're seeing that again going forward. We're currently at, this is currently the June 10th returns, and we're already at 29.12 degrees Celsius. We've cracked 29 degrees across the entire Gulf. It's happened, and it's going to continue to happen. And taking a look at the climate reanalyzer, we can go ahead and shift to the Gulf region. Right here, we're seeing that surge continuing to build up. The only kind of cooled down a little bit, but now we're back to where we were just about to eclipse 2024 levels right now. Remember, 2024 early on was really concerning to take a look at with how warm the Gulf was. And yes, it did cool down quite a bit in the off season, mainly because of cold fronts, mainly because of synoptic activity like mid-latitude cyclones, all that stuff. That's pretty typical to happen. But we're seeing a scenario now where these SSTs continue to surge, and they're keeping pace with what was going on last year. And the warmest we got to was in 2023, around August 2023. And if these continue, especially over the next 2 weeks where we see high pressures, favorable environments in the Gulf, that could ultimately, at least in terms of later on, cause some very big problems. Mainly because what we're seeing with this is we saw record-breaking SSTs across the Gulf. We could potentially meet or beat that if this 2-week span of just high pressure ridges form across much of not the Pacific, but the Gulf. So that's something to pay attention to, and we're going to want to see how this will evolve in the next couple of weeks, just to kind of see what's going on. And also looking at the anomalies right here, this isn't just one area that's been surging. The MDR has been surging. The Caribbean has been surging. Heck, even the subtropical Atlantic has been surging more as well, I've noticed. Taking a quick look at this, compared to the 6th, things were a lot further to the south. You were seeing more 27 plus degrees Celsius waters, 28 plus degrees Celsius waters south of the subtropical region, which starts at about 30 degrees north. Now look at it. We're seeing a lot more 29s starting to pop up in the Atlantic basin. We're starting to see more of that happening in the Bahamas. The loop current, the Gulf Stream is moving up further and further to the north. Heck, even with these SST anomalies, you can barely make out where the loop current is anymore. But there is one thing you can do to look at where the loop current is, and that is look at the ocean heat content. Here's the ocean heat content for today, ladies and gentlemen. And my, oh my, things continue to ramp up. Taking a look at the OHC, we're looking at multiple pockets getting close to cracking 150 OHC across the loop current, across parts of the Caribbean as well. Like, matter of fact, let's go ahead and go back to 3 days ago when we were noticing that surge really starting to ramp up. Things were getting pretty interesting. This was starting to connect. This was starting to increase in terms of its width right here. Where are we at right now? Boom. More OHC everywhere in the northwestern Caribbean and in the loop currents. That's a pretty big concern, and that's a very bad sign for things to come. Also noticing as well the shift of the OHC. The surge just continues across much of the Caribbean, and even in the in the Atlantic basin as well. You're starting to see more of that surge happening. Same with the Gulf Stream. as well. June is when you start to notice all this OHC start to bubble up right here, and that's a very concerning sign, and that's kind of why hurricane season starts so early, even though there's not that much activity, because the conditions are there for tropical development sometimes, and by and large, that's the kind of situation that we have. I mean, look at Beryl from last year. We had really good conditions for a span of about a week in late June and early July that allowed Beryl to become a Category 5 hurricane because of that. That's why hurricane season starts on June 1st and not July 1st. Right here, because you have those instances where tropical development does occur like in June, and it's happened over the last 10 years or so. Will it continue for this year? We're not 100% sure, but June is always supposed to be a slow start. Usually it is. I mean, last year was the exception to the rule, but hey, it's going to happen at some point. But another factor we need to pay attention to is the wind shear. And here's what we have going on with the current wind shear right now. Wind shear across much of the subtropical Atlantic pretty low, not a very good sign right here. Also, in the tropics, it's still relatively high. That's to be expected. But I am concerned about this whole situation in terms of the wind shear being low in the subtropics, and here's why. Someone was in the comments asking me this in about if lower wind shear equals warmer, the SST's warming up faster? And the answer is yes, because there's less wind to upwell the water, and there's less sloshing around and all of that stuff. It's in terms of how much wind shear there is. It also allows that water to go deeper and deeper and deeper down because it's not getting mixed in, and you can allow that specific heat to really continue to dive further down in terms of the water temperature. Right there. So that was a pretty good question. I hope that answers it right there. But ultimately, you're noticing these wind shear patterns, and you're also noticing something else that I've been paying attention to in terms of what we were seeing with the wind shear, not just the anomalies, but also just the wind shear forecast in general. Here's what we have with the wind shear right now. Basically, pretty linear right now, comparatively speaking, but watch as the later part of this run comes in, how it becomes less blocky and less consolidated and more wavy. It starts to fluctuate more, starts to go up and down, up and down, up and down. Right here, you're starting to notice a lot more troughs and a lot more jets right here. That's also a concerning sign I'm paying attention to, because look at what we're potentially seeing in June. Look at what we're potentially seeing in July, ladies and gentlemen. This wind shear pattern right here is an early to mid-July setup right here in terms of tropical development right here, in terms of the activity, in terms of how the wind shear pattern climatologically goes. You do not want to see stuff like this happening on June 20th. Quite frankly, you want to see this start to get going in terms of the average around July 10th to 12th. This is, if these runs continue to be true, and considering the consistency of them, I do believe them to be, we're going to see shear that is ahead of schedule in terms of tropical development. But not just the shear I'm paying attention to, looking at the relative humidity as well. Looking at that, in fact, we were looking at some of the anomalies earlier in terms of the wind shear. According to this, it looks like those Mediterranean winds continue to be weaker than average. Why am I bringing this up? Those Mediterranean winds pick up the Sahara dust from North Africa and drive them into the Atlantic. If we're seeing weaker Mediterranean winds, we're going to see less Sahara dust. And that's kind of the situation that we have right there. So you have all the Sahara dust. Yes, there's still going to be a lot of dry air, don't get me wrong. But in terms of the anomalies right here, this is the precipitable water anomalies above and below average, you're seeing less of that dry air, and you're seeing more moisture across much of the tropics, especially like for the month of June. That's also telling me the Sahara dust is going to be ahead of schedule. So those are some factors that we're continuing to pay attention to right here, especially the water temperatures and the Sahara dust, because those are the two main things I've been kind of concentrating on every time I've been forecasting this, because of how uncertain particularly the latter is. So all those things are important to pay attention to, and we'll continue to update you on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. I put out a new poll on my community tab. I hope you guys go vote for that, because that'll determine what time we start the live stream on Saturday night, because we are going to be streaming again. We're doing this every week for the month of June. We might add some more days once tropical development looks potentially more prominent, but we'll see how that pans out. But like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to hang out, help out, or ask us questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.